Welcome to Her Fabulous Financial Future, a podcast by Women's Wealth. Here at Women's Wealth, we want to be your best financial friend, your BFF on money matters. If you've ever thought, I'm useless with money, or it feels like I should know more about this stuff, but somehow I just don't, then this is for you. I'm Sam Seckham, an award-winning chartered financial planner with decades of experience as an independent financial advisor. But much more relevant and interesting are the amazing women I meet and their stories. Let's talk about finances, bust through the taboos and take charge. We can create our own fabulous financial futures. Welcome to the podcast, Jess. I'm very, very pleased to have you here. You were one of Women's Wealth's original clients, and I feel very kindred with you, really, because I've watched your journey and enjoyed working with you.
Oh, thank you, Sam. I didn't realise that. That's so exciting. And yeah, it's been a good journey. So I'm looking forward to sort of talking through it with you today.
Okay. If I could just describe your circumstances a little bit, Jess, so that everyone knows where you are in your life. I'm not going to give your age away too much, but you're young, certainly compared to me. And you're working in big tech. You've got good income, and of course the job comes with a bonus and share options. So whether you want to be an investor or not, you're straight in there with decisions to make around shares and things. But you are sort of thinking, I don't know, is this forever, or are there other things I would want to do in terms of my career and earnings potential? And one of the things that I always think is a bit of a challenge for young people who are in great careers is you can get very trapped there because you get very used to the lifestyle that it affords you and what have you. But I know that you're quite cognizant of that and thinking, if I'm going to do something, maybe I need to do it sooner rather than later. You also live in London, so that's not cheap. And you've been wondering about, should I buy, should I rent? And you had to make some decisions around that. So loads of stuff going on for you. So it makes it a very exciting story for people to hear. Can I start by asking you, what was it that initially had you looking around going, you know what, I need to get some help?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for the intro. I think you've really summed up my kind of background and experience really well as well. So, but in terms of what I was thinking when I was looking for a financial advisory service, the main driver was that I would really describe myself as a feminist, and yet I was still calling and asking my dad for financial advice. And bless him, he's great, but he doesn't live in this country either. So he had some useful advice, but the best thing he told me was get a financial advisor. And when I look at that compared to kind of other friends I've got that work in financial services and the kind of finance sector, they're all really forthcoming with their advice and insight, but no one knows my personal context as well as myself at the time and now you. So it was around that kind of mentality. I felt like I actually wasn't living my own values at the time, sort of ringing and asking dad. So I then had heard on a podcast years ago about trying to find ways of getting women more involved and engaged in the finance services sector. And one of them was this sort of burgeoning sort of nascent trend of women's focused financial advisory services. And so when I kind of did my first Google, I was like, right, I'm not even going to bother with anything that doesn't have women in the name or in the kind of company mission. So just literally wanted something that was going to deal with my probably more emotional relationship with money. I think I don't think of it so rationally at times, and we can kind of go into that a bit later. But I feel like I've got a very kind of emotive relationship with money, and I didn't know where to start. So that was the sort of flurry of influences really that got me to finding you.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted that you did. Can you remember what sort of, when you did the Google search, what were your choices and what narrowed it down to Women's Wealth?
So there were a few choices. I was pleasantly surprised to see that this was a thing, women's advisory services. I think there was one other one that I had noticed, but women's wealth in particular, I like the subscription model, and it didn't seem like anyone else kind of had that model. And given I have a sort of aversion to spending money comfortably, I didn't think I was going to respond very well to a model that looked like me going and spending 150 quid per session with them, or sort of on demand as I need. So I really like the subscription-based model that you've got, and it felt a little bit more like establishing a long-term friendship where I could kind of ring and say, hello, I need help again, rather than just sort of book in an appointment once a year and that's it. So I liked that about women's wealth.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm glad that all of those things attracted you. We deliberately chose the way we charge to avoid any need to sell anything to you. That if you need products, and we'll arrange them for you as independent financial advisors. But the important thing for us is that women get to level up, and empower themselves with information, and get more confident around the decision making. I love your recognition that money is an emotive subject, and that, you can't really understand your relationship with money if you don't make room for the way it makes you feel and the opportunities it provides you. And it isn't just a tool, is it? As much as it might be meant to be that, it isn't.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it's funny looking back now when I was having conversations with friends and they'd say, oh, just invest it, just invest your savings, or just do this. And I was like, you will prize that money out of my cold dead hands before I will put it in investments, because I don't know how to do it and I didn't know where to start. So it was a bit of a fear-based kind of decision-making model. But yeah, it wasn't working for me at the time. So that was, and I knew that. So that was why I kind of sought you out.
Yeah. We like being considered people's best financial friend. So we put that out there as a message. And I think that's maybe what attracted you from what you're saying. You wanted someone to get alongside you and help you.
Yeah, I think the friend bit is so important because it doesn't feel like, I'm not walking into like a stuffy office and someone's going to point at some graphs and say, this is where you are, this is where you need to get to, kind of thing. It is a really friendly, approachable kind of conversation. And we've had loads of that where I've kind of come to you and gone, oh God, I've got so much to confess. And like a good friend, you've gone, okay, you can do this with your own money.
It's loud.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we did the habitudes session? We did the cards, didn't we? And that I remember that being quite good fun. It was quite explorative, wasn't it? So the habitudes is this method of like just looking into our habits and our attitudes around money, and we gamify it a little bit to make it more approachable. But you got some great insights from that, I remember. And I remember you also thinking, I'm more generous than that. Really, I am.
Yes, I know. It was interesting. I think what didn't surprise me in the habitudes was my extreme aversion to risk, and the sort of the saving kind of mentality, kind of squirreling it away. And the generosity thing did surprise me, but it came down to, I put a bit of effort into, Christmas present and things, but really I could donate to more charities and share my money that way. So it was an interesting kind of take on what it actually means to be generous or not generous with your money. Yeah.
And, there is a flip side to being generous. You can go too far in that direction. But I think one of the things that I was able to share with you is that I do this exercise with lots of different women from lots of different ethnic and cultural backgrounds. And some women are brought up in environments where they virtually give everything they earn away to like a family pot, as it were, because their education was provided by that family and they have an obligation to keep the older generation. But that's not how we were brought up, you and I, as white Western women. So it's a different take on it, and our results come out very differently because of that. And I think that's just a really great example of how there's no way we can get through life without being conditioned by our upbringing, our environment, and the cultural rules around the societies that we belong to. So, it's sometimes you have to let yourself off and go, you know what, I was brought up like that. That is me. I am the sum of my parts.
Exactly. And you know what, when we did that habitudes test, I then messaged my family, and I come from, sort of a middle class background. I grew up in a middle class family, and it was funny when I saw that. I was like, gosh, I have an odd relationship with money. And I messaged my parents and said, oh, I just did this test and I've got this like extremely low risk of sort of risk appetite. And my dad said, yep, I've got that too. So it's come from somewhere.
Yeah. So he identified with it as well.
Absolutely.
And, just having that come out in the profiling, it doesn't mean that you can't invest. It just means that you've got to nurse yourself with knowledge and confidence and understand the risks associated with gaining rewards and not push yourself too far. Otherwise, it just feels too uncomfortable and you won't be able to stick with it. So hopefully, because you have invested and some of what you've done hasn't worked out great first experience, has it? So do you want to talk to us about what you've experienced so far?
So it's a good question. I did, my first investing with you. So we kind of got it's a managed fund, isn't it? That's the right word. Look at me, I've got my knowledge. So we talked through sort of the benefits of a managed fund for someone like myself, where I didn't want to be kind of deeply involved in the ins and outs of it, and it was going to sort of tick over maybe at a slower rate at first, or sort of maybe at a slower rate, but it just took that pressure off me. And I really, really liked how ethical that fund that you sourced for me was. So that actually took a little bit of the edge off. I felt like it was a nice way to dip into the investment world. But yeah, I mean, in the first year or so, it's lost a little bit of money, but it's actually been good to see that, because I think it's taken the edge off now. Like, I'm like, okay, you can lose money, and it didn't change my day-to-day life, which was a really important lesson, I think, because I was so sort of emotional about money. I was like, I could never face losing money, because what would it do to me? And turned out it had very little impact on me, and in the long run, it will probably bounce back, fingers crossed. But I think it was just a really good hands-on lesson, and there was no other way that I would have been able to learn that. And I would never have been confident in myself to go and do that and make that decision and then watch it lose money, because I would go, well, I don't think I understood it, or I made a mistake here, and probably would have run away. So even though, and when we're talking about losses, it's not a colossal loss by any means. But it's still a loss, so it wasn't necessarily what I was expecting. But I was kind of coached through that, and coached through the mentality with yourself and Michelle, kind of saying, right, this is what's happened. This is what happens. This is what the market does. This is what we might expect it to do, kind of thing in the long run. So actually, it was not that bad.
Okay. So, I mean, that really pleases me. So it was the rehearsing how you would feel if it fell, and talking to you about the dynamics of what might happen next, and how actually we never know what the next thing the stock market's going to do is, whether it's going to be a dip or a rise, and that we're playing this longer term game. And the trick is you've got to just stay with it and keep your eye on the long term prize, and experience whatever you're going to experience in the way of emotions to the short-term movements. But we rehearsed it with you, didn't we? We talked to you about how would you feel, what would you do? Because it would be a disaster for you and us if you got so uncomfortable that you couldn't stay invested. So we agreed with you what the downside tolerance was, and we've never been anywhere near that. So, it's kind of staying within the rules, isn't it? And you're able to go, no, I knew it could do that. I'm all right. I don't need to bail.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not going to jump off the ship. It's not sinking yet, so
No,
it's okay.
no,
And
no.
I think it was just interesting to actually see it happen to me in real time. I think because I'd always thought, oh God, it would be so scary to lose money, and then to lose a couple of £100 and it be part of the plan almost. Not necessarily, but it was expected in a way. So I think also on this, some advice that you had given me at the beginning was cash, and this was 2 years ago. The value of cash is decreasing, so squirreling it away into a savings account isn't going to serve me well in the long run. I think this at least felt like a better option than just letting my savings that I wasn't using, it wasn't my savings to go on a holiday or anything like that. It was my long-term savings, letting that just kind of whittle away in value. And that statement you made has never been more true than this last week, right? So
absolutely. And as you say, when we were talking about that, we didn't have inflation like threatening everybody's financial security, did we? It was all seemed very moderate and under control then. But it's very much now a question, if you've got money in the bank, it's going to buy you less in future years than it would if you spent it today. And that's no reward for being an investor or saver, is it? You're going to get less.
So all that work.
Yeah, absolutely.
for less reward. Yeah.
But I think the important point you made there is that you didn't really understand that risk to the value of your savings. It was something that kind of only really became obvious to you as part of the discussing, what cash is in terms of a portfolio and what you keep it for and what you use other assets for. It was in understanding all of the different options, wasn't it, which made you go, actually, cash is not going to work. It's actually not a good idea at all. It's a risk to leave it there.
Yes, and no one had ever explained it to me like that. So it was interesting kind of saying, okay, well, my habits that I feel like I have developed to be safe are not the safe way to do it necessarily. And I was sort of reflecting on that actually around how I ended up here. And obviously I kind of mentioned my dad's got quite a low risk appetite for this sort of thing. But I think this is the first time I've been earning and really saving money and not then needing to use that savings straight away. So, for a long time during uni and after uni, I worked in kind of casual type jobs, part-time jobs where I was working, and the money that I was getting was great. Australia pays hospitality workers brilliantly. So it was good money for a 19, 20-year-old. But it wasn't necessarily enough to be going, actually, this is much more than what I'm using, or this is X, Y, Z more than what I'm using. So I'll keep that and do something long term with that. This was, I'm working at this bar because I'm really excited to go on a nice big holiday in a few weeks' time or something like that, So yeah, you
were still going to consume that money. You weren't really thinking about keeping it for later on. Yeah,
absolutely.
But you've actually made a conscious decision not to consume all your money in your current earnings, haven't you? So that you've got options, career options that don't mean you've got to earn at this level to carry on living the lifestyle that you create for yourself. You wanted to leave yourself options, didn't you? So you've chosen to spend less than 100% of your income.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a little savings plan, which I read about. So before I joined Women's Wealth, I read a book called The Barefoot Investor. And I found it quite useful in terms of just sort of how to save. So at the time when I didn't know you or anything like that, so it put in some good. Well, it was more around spending parameters. So this is what I'm allocating for my in-month spending. This is what I'm allocating to putting towards some savings towards my holidays and flights and things like that. And then I've got they call it fire extinguisher fund. I think over here it's a rainy day fund. It kind of speaks to the weather differences. But so and then the fire extinguisher fund, I was putting some money away into that as well. But then because I had such strict parameters or limits on my spending, I then would not spend more than that. So I was actually incidentally saving more because I was really lucky that my personal circumstances meant I didn't have to spend as much of my income on rent and bills and things like that. I don't have any dependents, so it's quite I can be very selfish with my money, as we worked out that I was. So yes, so I think that was a good way of setting myself up, but it also enforced a habit of save. And I felt like every time I ended the month with a bit extra money that I would put into a long-term savings account, that was like a pat on the head. But then I had no plan for that. But that's actually come around to be quite positive as we've kind of discussed the career change. So like we said, I'm in a great company and I love where I work, but I just don't think it's what I want to do with my whole life. And I feel really passionate about working in the public sector, particularly around public safety and justice, and kind of contributing to society through that. So those salaries don't come with the same big tech salary that I've got quite comfortable and used to, and you know, those I think you mentioned the kind of golden handcuff of investment options and things like that. So I've been really cautious of not letting myself get so sucked in to this lifestyle and this kind of these opportunities, because it's not truly how I want to live my life in the long run. And it's worked out well. Obviously, I'm going on that big trip next year, so using a good chunk of my savings towards that, and I'm really excited about having that as an option for something that I've kind of worked towards over the last few years.
So you've used some of the excess that you've deliberately created so that you're not spending up to your salary. You want to leave that margin there. And we've created a fund which is now going to make possible for you some sort of educational stuff and traveling, which is going to play into this other part of your life that you're building towards. We've loved doing that with you. It's exciting for us to be doing that planning. But along the way, you also had the, should I rent, should I buy dilemma, didn't you?
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I mean, this kind of discussion came around after a bit of a career planning session. So I was looking at maybe joining the armed forces or doing something that meant I was expecting quite a drop in my salary. So really, it felt like the best time to try and get a mortgage with the salary that I was on. Also, at the time, it was a stamp duty relief, so that was quite a positive. And the other aspect was around my bank was quite keen to give out mortgages. I think they were expecting what has happened to come down the line. So I was with a few little bits of research, I was very quickly able to get myself into quite a strong position with a good mortgage sort of offer, and then found that flat. And to be honest, I feel like I've set myself up a little bit more securely, but I feel like I have because I've always got somewhere to come back to now, rather than have to worry about trying to scrape together a deposit for another rental place and things like that. So that was really how that discussion and sort of big change came about, though it still was a very stressful time.
And we were thrilled to watch you kind of navigating it, and because you went from being from not being a property owner to being a property owner and a landlady, because you're sharing with somebody, aren't you, to kind of keep the costs manageable. So like all of that's part of growing up, isn't it, financially? And it's not easy. Those are the experiences you have to have. You can't learn about them from a book, really. You have to get in amongst it and have the experience. And it's not always going to be really, really positive. And actually, I'm very worried for people who, have really overstretched themselves getting onto the property market, onto the ladder. And I know that I've talked to you about keeping it affordable, stress testing the numbers so that you don't put yourself in a place where it's uncomfortable to owe money, and always to have the option not to need a tenant.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, the tenant was a big benefit for me. Being able to have a friend move in and share my house is great. But I was very much open to your feedback of don't put yourself in a position where you can't just not have them, and you can't make it through a few months if you've got no one living there. Yeah, that was a really important piece of advice that was useful kind of going into it. But it's not been as bad as I expected, so it's been good.
Yeah, you've had a nice experience, haven't you, with it? So, so that's great. But a lot of what we try to do is to help you build resilience into your financial planning, so that if things don't work out the best way, you've still got options. You leave enough margin to kind of, be able to pivot, reshuffle, reorganize, because there's nothing more important than our happiness and our sanity. So we have to kind of always make sure that the resources are available to protect ourselves if things don't go according to plan. So that was part of the mission. We did some cash flow modeling with you, didn't we, as well? So hopefully you saw the benefits of, like, if one expense, if one income stream disappears, can you still cover everything? That was that was the value of that. So can I ask you, what was the toughest part of the journey? Maybe the least enjoyable or the most challenging part of working with Women's Wealth?
Good question. I don't think any of it has been unenjoyable. I think it's really important. I've really enjoyed having, making that financial friend in you and in Michelle as well. And sort of the learning experience has challenged me and my perspectives, which has been really interesting. I think the thing that I struggled with, and I think I still struggle with, you're going to laugh when I tell you, is the worry about being judged. So by you, and I don't know where I've got this from, because you're not judgmental at all. In fact, you're brilliant at sort of taking my kind of fear and emotion out of the decisions. But I often feel like when we come to reviews and things, I'm like, oh God, I've now got to confess that I've spent this much on the gym, or I've got to come, it's literally like coming in and sort of washing my sins away. And I remember this new kind of food service that I've been using, the grocery kind of meal service. And I was like, oh God, you're going to just absolutely roll your eyes at what I've done. And you sat down and said, well, how much do you spend on it if you don't have this? And I said, oh, this much. And then you said, and you're spending this much on it with it. And I said, yeah. And you said, well, there's really no difference. So, and it was interesting, because obviously I probably knew that if I really sat down and looked at it, but I was just trying to so blind myself from it. So I think that's something that I'm getting used to, because if you don't have a financial advisor, if you don't have a financial friend, right, you can kind of get away without that experience of worrying about judgment. You still will probably judge yourself, and it will still probably be a negative experience, but you don't have to explain to someone, oh, well, I've changed gyms and now I'm spending more. And in my mind, I think that's a naughty thing. And now I'm worried about what you're going to say. But you don't bat an eyelid. So it was quite nice. Yeah. But I think that would be the difference, the challenge.
Okay. And I think, being an accountability partner is part of what we do. The good news for us working with you is that you're very disciplined. You already had good disciplines around your spending. So other ladies haven't. They're much more challenged, and we have to be that accountability partner for them. And I'm sure they had the same experience as you, because it's not really us judging; it's them judging themselves, as you said. But that's part of being human. And most of the women we meet have some sort of shame around money. It's always, I should know more about this. I should be doing better than this. I'm not doing as well as my friends at this. And that's just such a kind of degrading and debilitating state, that state of shame. So we're very keen that we kind of disband all of that and go, okay, so what do you want to do instead? Let's get amongst it. Let's see what we can change. Let's see what's on the table in the way of opportunity. So, so I think it's not uncommon for people to feel that they're not doing as well as they should, and that somebody's going to kind of call them out on it. So, the good news is we do call you out on the things we feel we need to, but only for your sake. You don't have to change anything. It's your life and your money. So
exactly. But I think it's good as well, because it's taught me a little bit around, I've got money and I earn that money. working for it, so I should feel that I can spend it. And it's funny. I just find it so funny having to come to you and
we
tell
have
you
to
these things
encourage you a little bit, don't we, to
Yes.
spend and to
Yes.
reward yourself and to use money to improve your availability to time and to get some things done quicker and easier, because if you end up in an area of neglect if you don't use the money to achieve that. So, it is a question sometimes of helping people spend. And I think that's a little bit more what we need to do sometimes for you, Jess.
It's a nice problem to have, I will say. It's a good conversation to have.
But it still, isn't it, dismantling shame that sometimes we just don't know how it got in there. But
yeah, and I don't want they'll think I'm so frivolous and this, that, and the other, where it doesn't matter to you. You don't mind, if that's what I want to do.
Yeah, especially if it's serving you well. That's the point, exactly. Really. Is it serving you well? So, Jess, I'm really conscious of the time. I know you're busy. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience, because I think, I hope that these podcasts help other women feel more comfortable about the idea of taking advice and a bit more aware of what it might offer them in terms of benefits. So thank you for sharing with us. And we love having you as a client. Thank you for mentioning Michelle as well. Just for anybody who doesn't know how Women's Wealth work, we work as a team. There'll be a money mentor and a financial advisor. And it just doubles the amount of access you have, and we have different strengths. So the financial advisor might be a little bit more technically qualified, but your money mentor will have the attention to detail and be much kind of more involved in the coaching and behavioural side of what matters around money decisions. So so Michelle and I work with you as a team, don't we? And you've mentioned her a couple of times. She'll be pleased to hear her name.
Oh, good. Well, yes. Thank you very much, Michelle. And you too, Samantha. I think it's important to say, I just want to kind of reiterate that I really think the best financial decision that I've made in my life was getting a financial advisor, because I didn't know what to do. And importantly, I didn't know where to start. And whenever I didn't grow up here in the UK, I grew up in Australia. So moving here, pension, things like that are really different. So I can't stress enough how stress-free it feels to have someone who's working to represent and reflect your interests and support you through your own decisions and planning for your future. So thank you to yourself and the rest of the team at Women's Wealth, because you've helped me a lot.
Oh, we're so pleased to hear that. That's what it's all about, really. We want women to feel much more comfortable and informed about their money-making choices. So thank you for your time, Jess. Much appreciated. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Speak to you soon. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you found it useful. Let us know what you thought by leaving us a review, and give us any hints or tips on subjects that you would really benefit from if we covered them in future episodes. We want to be useful. Women's Wealth are independent financial advisors, and we're authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. But the information presented here is not intended to be personal advice for you. So what might be good for somebody else might not be right for you. If you want to talk to us about your personal needs, then feel free to jump on a free Zoom call by visiting Women's Wealth. That's womans-wealth.co.uk.